Hey guys, Lou here, aka the DFS Data Dad, to break down the divisional slate upcoming this weekend. It is a 4-game slate. Just got through the wild card weekend, saw some teams get eliminated, and we have some pretty good matchups coming up this week. So really, what we're going to do here is take a first look, give some thoughts and insights as to what players we might like, what game environments we might want to target, and then later on in the week we'll kind of post a finalized analysis of some of the best plays and how we see these games projecting. But before we get into that, I just want to call out for any new viewers, this channel is not a I'm right, you're wrong channel. I'm really just here to give my insights, my thoughts, and really just here to talk about football. So I do the weekly DFS analysis. I also do some best ball analysis, although I'm not a best ball expert. I'm relatively new to it. But just looking to get better and hopefully looking to make you guys better in the process. And I'll probably be doing some MLB best ball drafts coming up in about a month or so once the football season's over. I can't believe we're already there. But yeah, hopefully here to create good content for you guys. Here to facilitate any discussions through comments. So without further ado, if you guys can give me a subscribe, I'm a man for the people. I'm here to give you guys information, draw insights that you might be missing, and I'm not really asking for anything in return. Just subscribers, just watch my content, and really just hoping to help you guys out. And in the process, if you can give me a like or a comment, any sort of interaction on my videos definitely helps me out. And yeah, by leaving a comment, I'm happy to respond to everybody who has thoughts. Even if you disagree with me, if you agree with me, great. Glad to be on the same page as you. But also, if you disagree with me, great. I definitely want to understand your perspective and hopefully make the case for my perspective. And hopefully, when I do make the case for me, it's in the right direction and not the wrong direction. I'm not leading you guys down a bad path. But without further ado, let's kind of just hop right into the slate. It's a 4-game slate. We're seeing here opening up with Kansas City and Houston, followed by Detroit and Washington later on Saturday night. Then the Sunday games, we have Philly and the Rams, and I think the game that everyone's anticipating the most is Buffalo and Baltimore. So a little bit of my process here of what I look like or what I go through when I'm evaluating slates is I like looking at the points, trying to use that as a guide to understand which teams I should probably investigate for stacking purposes. We see Detroit is the clear leader in terms of projected points on this slate on nearly 33, followed by Baltimore at 26. We have the Chiefs at also about 26. We have the Bills and Eagles at 25, the Commanders at 23, and the Rams at 19, followed by the Houston Texans, projected to score the least amount of points against Kansas City at 17. So, another thing I like to look at, and there's definitely some flaws to doing this. I do like to look at defenses against the position. So this is really an aggregate across the entire football season, the regular season. I like looking at which defenses give up the most fantasy points per position, just to use it as a guide. So in terms of playoff teams here, Rams, Lions, Ravens, Chiefs are all top 15. Even Texans you can add in there. Scroll to the bottom here. The Eagles and Commanders actually give up the least amount of points to quarterbacks. So I kind of find that interesting, which means it might be a tough time for Stafford, might be a tough time for Jared Goff, but considering how good their weapons are and how good their offensive line is, and considering what their implied team total is, doesn't look like this will hold up and stick from the regular season into the playoff season. I think running back is a position that is more likely to stick into the playoffs. The Bills, so I think a core play for me will probably and obviously be Derrick Henry. The Bills give up the most fantasy points out of all playoff teams to running backs. And if you look at the offensive play distribution for Baltimore, in the last 3 games, they've run the ball. So this is the inverse of running percentage. So they've thrown the ball 36% of the time, which means 64% of the time they've run the ball. Now, they do run the ball a lot with Lamar Jackson, but when you have Derrick Henry, you're going to do whatever you can to make sure that the ball gets into his hands. So all of 2024, they ran at a 47% clip, just about. They ran at about a 53% of the clip. And last game, they ran the ball nearly 70% of the time. So it might be confusing. We're looking at passing play here. So this is just 31% minus 100 gives you it's what, 69%. So Derrick Henry looks like a really good play, just at first glance. Same thing with Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Commanders give up a lot of points. They've given up 16 rushing touchdowns, which is the most out of all of the playoff teams. Detroit, another team that likes running the ball. They've been a little more balanced than Baltimore, but when you have as good of an offensive line as them, you're going to want to run the ball. The only downside is that it looks like Monty will be back for this week. I know they love using him, especially on early downs, and especially to close games out as their bruising running back. So something to consider, but it'll be really hard to keep Jahmyr Gibbs off the field if I'm the Detroit Lions. Seeing the finish that he had to the year, he was absolutely amazing. Looking at wide receivers, first glance, Detroit gives up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers, followed by the Ravens. I think one thing I want to call out about this Ravens is as of late, they've been really good against wide receivers. I think all of this data came in the first half of the season. They seem to really tighten things up. But yeah, with the Lions, they actually don't give up many receiving touchdowns, right? Like they're in the bottom 5 in terms of receiving touchdowns that they give up. So something to think about, especially considering the Commanders' projected point total, which isn't extremely low. But I do like Mahomes against the Texans here. Heavy favorites. They seem to have found a groove at the end of the year. Xavier Worthy has burst on the scene. They got Hollywood Brown. He's back. He's healthy. The last game before the end of the regular season that Kelsey played, he had a really good game. The Texans give up the third, tied for second most wide receiver touchdowns on the year. I know Stingley just made life difficult for Justin Herbert, and that's partially because of Will Anderson too and good pass rush, but I don't see that same type of performance, especially against Patrick Mahomes. And just to bring it home with the tight ends here, some of the playoff teams are right at the top in terms of DK points against. I like Dallas Goedert in this spot. He seems healthy. He seems to have gotten a lot of attention from Jalen Hurts. Maybe if they key in again on A.J. Brown, he had a brutal day, 1 catch for 10 yards. Maybe they try to force feed him a little more to get him going, but it didn't look good for him. But the Chiefs, yeah, maybe Dalton Schultz is a good flyer. They might need to use the middle of the field to get downfield and compete to keep up with the Chiefs. So yeah, just initial thoughts. Also looking at target percentage, and I've had this filtered for all the playoff teams. Amon-Ra sees the highest team target percentage out of any wide receiver on the slate. Also has a really good matchup. I don't think anyone's going to be able to cover him on the Commander side, so I like him as a play. Terry McLaurin, pretty self-explanatory. He's the main guy, and especially playing against the Detroit Lions, you're going to need to score points. My only qualm is that they don't give up too many receiving touchdowns. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are essentially the same in terms of target percentage. I like Smith because he's cheaper, and seeing how A.J. Brown went last game, not looking too optimistic, and the Rams actually are pretty decent defensively. Puka and Cooper Kupp definitely have a tough assignment ahead of them. It looks like Kupp is really falling off. I don't know what's going on with him. I invested heavily in him in best ball, and that came back to burn me. So that's not looking good for him. I do like Khalil Shakir, and just looking at his salary, he's really cheap. I think it could be a good matchup for him. He's somebody they line up in the slot, use the middle of the field, take some slants, get in the soft spots in the defense, and he's pretty cheap. We'll get into a little bit of why I don't like the Bills as a DFS stacking perspective, and it's a pretty valid reason. But on the Chiefs side, yeah, I really love the Chiefs. It's hard for me to stay away from them, especially when you consider how cheap they are. And I'm mainly talking about Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. They're really cheap, and Hollywood gets another week of health. Explosive player, better than Hopkins at this point. I'd rather play him instead of Hopkins. And looking at the tight ends, right, like Kelsey's clearly above everyone else in terms of team target percentage at the top. I think he has a good matchup. The other tight end I have interest in, there's a lot of tight ends I have interest in actually. I do like Laporta. He's a key component of the Lions offense. Same thing with Mark Andrews. I had a strong stance on Kincaid last week, and I might walk back on that a little bit this week. But Dallas Goedert, yeah, another strong tight end play. All right, so let's get into breaking down position by position. What I'll do is I'll go through each position, and I will give you my favorite play for each position. And my favorite play means somebody that I have zero concerns over locking into your lineup. Like, I am making my stand. If I had to put all of my money on each player, if I was given $400 and I had to allocate $100 to each player, this is the player that I'm choosing out of the entire pool per position. So I'll just give my thoughts on some of these quarterbacks. I don't think I need to hit on every single one, and then I'll give you my favorite play. So Lamar, in a really good game environment, last week had 15 rushing attempts, so you do get a really good floor in terms of rushing. Can probably get into the end zone with his legs too. And not out of the ordinary to get over 100 yards. He only did it once this year though, and that was the beginning of the year. Looking at his history against Baltimore, a really low volume passing day, and they won 35-10, so maybe that explains why the volume was so low. But ran for 54 yards and a touchdown, giving him 25 fantasy points. I think the Bills and Ravens game is going to be played really tough and tight. And I group Allen and Lamar, I see them as the same. Two running backs that are mobile. Two quarterbacks that are mobile. Two quarterbacks that rarely elevate a position player with them for GPP purposes to win a tournament. The Ravens' offense is way more consolidated and condensed than the Bills. The Ravens, the ball is really going to one of Flowers, Andrews, likely Bateman. I'll put Bateman as the fourth priority. And when they're running the ball, obviously Lamar and Henry. But when you look at this Bills offense, there's 11 different players this ball can go to. It's really spread out. It's really hard to project, and it's really hard for this guy to bring other players up with him. I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I'm saying I have the least amount of it sounds bad for me saying I have the least amount of interest in Josh Allen, but when you consider his salary and when you consider how frequently he brings players up with him, it's rare. So there's 11 different players, right? There's Josh Allen. Then there's 3 running backs that they use. They use Cook, Davis, Ty Johnson. And then there's like 6 wide receivers. There's Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, Curtis Samuel. 5 wide receivers. And then there's 2 tight ends. There's Knox and Kincaid. So on any given day, one of these guys can catch a touchdown pass. And if you're on the wrong side of that, your lineup is totally burned. Jaden Daniels, pretty similar to the other 2 guys. If he's going to bring a pass catcher up with him, it's probably going to be Terry McLaurin. Lions don't give up many passing touchdowns. Harder to defend Jaden Daniels because of his running ability and mobility. But going into Detroit is a hostile environment. I don't see Jaden Daniels paying off his price tag here. It's a tough assignment for him. And because of how how he rarely brings other wide receivers up with him, I'm probably not playing him. Jalen Hurts, these top 4 quarterbacks are all like very much the same. Like the Eagles just don't throw the ball a lot. And between him and Barkley, they run a lot and even Gainwell. Hurts is the cheapest out of all of these quarterbacks, which is probably the most enticing. And I think out of all the defenses I would want to play a quarterback against, I think the Rams might be the second most defense I would want to target. But yeah, very little interest in Hurts. The 2 quarterbacks I probably have the most interest in is Goff. Passing volume is there. Lions love to score points. Easy to project where the ball is going. That's Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Laporta, J-Mo taking their deep shots. J-Mo's definitely risky, but in terms of consistency and floor, I think Amon-Ra, Laporta, and Gibbs are your guys to stack with Goff. Might be expensive, and you might have some difficulty filling in the rest of your roster, but definitely viable. And then Mahomes. His pass catchers come really cheap this week, and it's Patrick Mahomes. It's hard to bet against this guy, especially at Arrowhead, especially considering that the Texans gave up 21 passing touchdowns this year. Mahomes is probably the quarterback I have the most interest in this week, and he's really cheap. When have you ever seen Mahomes at $6K? Right, like this entire $6K is his absolute floor this whole year. Really easy to get behind that. At the running back position, it's really 3 guys. It's Barkley, Henry, Gibbs for me. I think Kyron has a tough matchup. I think Cook has a tough matchup. And again, 23 rushing attempts. They gave him his highest volume the entire year. I don't know if that sticks this game. I'm making my stand on Cook again. And then the rest of these guys are subject to game script, tough matchups. Look, these two offenses run the ball the most when you look at their play distribution. Baltimore runs at a really high clip. Philly runs at a really high clip. Probably both good matchups in terms of offensive line versus defensive line. Both have the ability to break big plays, and I'm adding Gibbs in there too. The only negative with Gibbs is that David Montgomery comes back, but maybe he's not fully healthy. Maybe he's not fully mobile, agile. Gibbs will need to be on the field more. Gibbs is the most explosive player. Gibbs is the most dynamic player out of the 2. Monty's just your tough thumper to get you to the short yardage and to close games out. It's very hard for me to get away from any of these 3. Wide receivers. Oh, sorry. Favorite play, quarterback, Mahomes. Favorite play, running back, Henry. On the wide receiver side, a lot of tough matchups. I think St. Brown, even though there's a 10 against opponent rank, I don't see anybody being able to guard him. I'm going to double down. I don't see anybody being able to guard A.J. Brown. I think this is the get-right game for A.J. Brown. So if you want to sprinkle him in as a one-off, or maybe get him with Barkley and get some other cheap pieces here, might be worth it. It'll be really hard to stay away from a $5,400 Cooper Kupp, but his volume as of late is just extremely low. Like, he has not had a good game in weeks. I think he'll be a popular click just because of the name, but do know it's not a good matchup, and do know his current form does not look good. I don't know why Xavier Worthy's so cheap. He's only $5,200, and he has nearly 30 targets in his past 2 games. He's an explosive player. They get the ball to him in multiple ways. And same thing with Hollywood Brown, right? Like, his 2 games back, 15 targets, only 40-something odd yards, but doesn't take much for him to fall into the end zone. And I'm sorry, I got to go back to the well here on Deontay Johnson. Saw limited opportunities, getting integrated in a new offense, so it makes sense. It takes time to learn an offense. It's rare that a player could just jump in and make an immediate impact, but it's been a couple weeks now. I think it's been 3 weeks. This is week 3 or 4 with the team. So maybe his integration has gone a little deeper now. This is a must-win, obviously a must-win game. It's do or die for the Texans, and I'm betting on the talent here. I think he's still talented. Maybe I won't go 100% in on him this week, but it's a good pivot off of Nico, even though Nico is the more dominant wide receiver. These guys played a couple weeks back. Nico saw 10 targets, just 60 yards on 7 catches. It's a tough defense to play against. I loved Stroud last week, and we were right about it. This week, I'm just not so optimistic, but I do think that points will be scored by the Texans, and it's probably going to come through the air. And then there's a lot to like at the tight end position. Sorry, my favorite play for wide receivers, Xavier Worthy. I do want to hit on Khalil Shakir. Only $5,000, sees volume. Good spot for the Bills to use the middle of the field. Last time these guys played, how'd he do? Yeah, 10 points. I mean, just based on what you're paying for and what you're getting, I think he's a great play. And then in terms of tight ends, we have Kelsey, who is, I don't know if he's my favorite play, just because he's a little more expensive than most of these guys. But yeah, attached to a team that's going to score points, Laporta really has come on as of late. His floor is 7 targets on the field all the time. Ertz is probably my least favorite. I don't know how much of a priority he's going to be. Kincaid only plays 50% of the snaps, splitting with Dawson Knox, but seeing how cheap he is, I definitely think it's interesting. Likely, I think just draws a tough matchup, especially if they get Zay Flowers back, then he definitely gets a bump down. Dalton Schultz saw 4 targets last game. Cade Stover's getting on the field, kind of eating into his work. Otherwise, if that wasn't the case, I'd like Dalton Schultz at 3,300 because the Chiefs' only weakness defensively are probably guarding tight ends. But I don't even think Dalton Schultz is good. So, you need to be a good player in order to, hit that right confluence where you're going up against a bad defense and you have on the opposing side, you have the good offensive piece to match that and exploit it. I just don't know if Dalton Schultz is that guy. But favorite tight end play out of all of these players here is probably Laporta. Just because... Sorry. It's going to be Goddard. Goddard's on the field. Goddard draws the best matchup against defenses versus tight ends, and he's relatively the cheapest. We saw what he did last game, scored a touchdown. They played the Rams earlier this year, only got 5.9 points, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. And then on the defensive side, really one defense I'm looking to get to and I'm looking to pay up for them. That's the Chiefs. It's going to be tough for the Rams to come into Philly and score points too. I think the Commanders just possess the ball really well and methodically make their way down the field, which could be a problem for the Lions. Limited opportunities to take the ball away. And then the rest of these defenses I don't really have any interest in. If you want to take a flyer on the Texans, maybe Will Anderson can get through to Mahomes again, like he did with Herbert, force some bad balls in the air. Stingley's there to pick them off. But it's not likely. Man, Mahomes is just a really good player. And it's a battle of the minds. I think it's Andy Reid versus D'Amico Ryan. And I think D'Amico Ryan is a good coach, but I think Andy Reid is better. So, if we need to build a first look lineup, considering how much I like Mahomes and considering how much I like the cheapness of his pass catchers, and that's Worthy and Hollywood Brown, I like the Chiefs' defense there. I like the cheapness of Dallas Goedert. I really want to pay up to get both of these running backs. So if I pay down to get Khalil Shakir here, it gives me 7,300. Need to make up a little more salary here. If we do Kelsey, so we have a triple with Worthy, Brown, Kelsey, Goddard. The only issue is that we get no access to any Detroit players here. So we have $900 left over. In order for us to get all three of these guys, Gibbs, it's not going to work. Yeah, I just have a hard time not having any of the Lions pieces, especially how good of a matchup their offensive line has. So if we can reconfigure some of this around where, let's keep Goddard. I don't think we need to go as far as a triple there. I don't think we're getting to D-Hop. If we do the bring back with, where's Deontay Johnson? It is extremely risky there. Gives us 7,400. We still can't get to Gibbs. Defensively, Eagles. And if we go to Curtis Samuel, right? Like maybe he falls in the end zone again. Maybe it's worth the gamble at 3,400. Let's see how often he was on the field. I don't think we'll be able to see it for this round. But when we look at the Bills, Curtis Samuel, 67% the game before, with everyone else on the field. You know, he's on the field enough where he can make plays. Where were we? Yeah, it might have to be him. So, I think a viable lineup. You have all three stud running backs. You've got a couple Chiefs pass catchers. You have a cheap Mahomes. You have Curtis Samuel, who's your dart throw, and you have Dallas Goedert, who you know is a good football player and is attached to a good offense in a good matchup. So we'll see how this goes. That does it for my first look. Be great if you guys can let me know what you think in the comments. Again, if you can give me a subscribe, greatly appreciate it. I'm really grateful to you guys for watching, new, returning. And if you can give me a like, definitely helps me out. And if I helped you out in any way so far in best ball or DFS, definitely let me know. And if I didn't, I also want to know. I want to know where I went wrong because I've definitely made some bad calls along the way. We're going to continue to make bad calls, but we're going to continue to learn from them. That's all we are here, right? Try to stay humble and use logic and data to make good decisions and hopefully win us some money. So we'll be back for some best ball drafts for the divisional round. Plan is to do 4, and we'll be back later this week to see if anything has changed with our analysis on the divisional round DFS slate. And thanks again, guys, for watching, and see you guys soon.